I am re-rolling, or rolling
So am I.
de nuevo.
Hey, that was Mexican.
You're listening to the Dunesteef audio fiction magazine.
It was, yeah. It's funny, when we came back from Mexico, I kept wanting to speak with people in Spanish. Every time I'd see somebody, I'd want to be like, hola! Because, we would try and do that as much as possible there.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Parsec-nominated Dunesteef team.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Dunesteef Audio Fiction Magazine. I'm Big Anklevich.
And I'm Rish Outfield. And we're doing another one of these? Seriously?
Yeah, I'm just gonna keep punishing you until you say you're sorry.
Oh, that's all I had to do to get out of all this work? Why didn't you say so? I can insincerely apologize.
All right, everybody, welcome back. We've got another part of our Christmas extravaganza. This is story number 4. Today's story is called The Beefalope Hunt.
A what?
Or How I Ruined Christmas. And it's by Munashii.
How about telling me about today's author?
And Munashii lives in the Sacramento area of California with his wife and her frequently disagreeable cat. When he's not writing, he can frequently be found greeting viewers with a hearty "Hello Potato" over on his YouTube channel, Void of Intelligence, where he does things like trying unhealthy food, putting together Lego kits, and even occasionally reading one of his short stories. Like this one.
So this was part of our Broken Mirror holiday event for last year, where everybody who wanted to could write a story based on the following premise.
You're invited to your girlfriend's
/ boyfriend
family Christmas dinner for the first time, but the meal isn't what you were expecting.
So everybody had to write a story based on that premise, and big shock, this next story is also about that.
Yeah, but another big shock, and it's something we've talked about a million times on this show, it's so different from any of the others. You know, it's interesting. I guess it's a really open-ended premise, but how you give 6 people the same premise and they go in such different ways that it makes me wonder how anyone has ever sued someone else for stealing their idea. Like, what's his face?
Harlan Ellison.
Yeah. He made a living more out of suing people than even writing stuff. We always talked about how, you had your story Lost and Found, which Orson Scott Card wrote a book as well called Lost and Found with a similar idea even behind it, a similar premise.
That's disgusting!
And yet, they're nothing alike. They're not really that similar. You give 2 different people the same idea and the stories that come out of it are going to be vastly different. And this one is one of them. We'll go ahead and check it out, listen to the story, and we'll see you back here on the other side. I hope you enjoy it.
Beefalope Hunt.
The Beefalope Hunt, or How I Ruined Christmas, a Zane and Delanna story, by Munashii. Life with Delanna was never what I would call easy, and her decision to reject her family's money was only a part of why. Even if she had taken an executive position at her family's company, I'm sure she still would have been the force of nature I fell in love with. The kind of person that runs towards the sounds of bolter fire instead of away from it. Another word I would never use to describe life with Delanna is boring. Take, for example, the first time I went home with her for Christmas. Now, this wasn't our first Christmas together. It was our third, actually. Nor was it my first time on Mars, or even meeting her parents. It was my first Christmas with the Troy family, though, and it was like no other Christmas in my life. This was still about 2 years before we saved up enough to buy our own ship, the CCSV Russian Unicorn, and get married. We were still running freight in the smelliest cargo freighter in the Panda Freight Fleet, the imaginatively named CCSV PF-1138. It just so happened that this year there was a couple of weeks' gap between our last run to Mars and our next run away from it. "Can you please stop that?" Delanna asked, with only a slight tone of annoyance as she summoned an auto with her data pod to pick us up from the Orson Welles Trans Hub. "What? Breathing?" I asked between taking deep breaths of air that had not been recycled, filtered, or come out of a tank, and yet was still not deadly. Having lived most of my life either on a ship or in a lunar dome, breathing air that didn't come out of a vent was a treat. "Breathing like someone who just took off their enviro suit that was running out of oxy? Yes. You look like a lunar?" Delanna bit her lower lip. "A tourist," she said after a moment. "I am a tourist. Am I embarrassing you?" She smiled. "Always, Zane Delrafi. You embarrass me everywhere we go. I don't know why I can't seem to be rid of you." During the autonomous automobile ride to her family home, Delanna tried to reassure me that this was going to be a fun and memorable Christmas, and that her parents would learn to be civil towards me. She was right about memorable. Like I said, I'd met Delanna's parents before, but I had never been to the family estate. Mars was terraformed generations ago, but some of the original colony domes had been preserved. Some were kept for historical purposes, but others were purchased by private entities. One dome was owned by the Troy family, something I only learned about when our auto pulled up to the airlock that now served as a main gate and was granted entry. After spending every Christmas of my youth in a lunar dome, I was now going to spend yet another Christmas in a dome, but this time on a planet with a breathable atmosphere. Once we were inside, I could tell that this had been an agridome. I could see the environmental generators mounted on the dome's frame, and that they had been used to turn the dome into a giant snow globe. Mounds of whiteness blanketed the ground for acres around us, and at the center, I could see Troy Manor, which frankly would not have looked out of place in an old Earth horror studio. The road leading up to the house was clear and dry, and the auto sped along it to a circular driveway in front of the porch of the, well, let's just call it what it was, mansion. Delanna's parents and one of the household service drones came out to meet us, or rather to meet their daughter, as I took our bags out of the auto's cargo compartment and placed them on the driveway. "Delanna!" Eugenia Troy called to her as she descended the porch steps. "It's been too long, darling." She moved quickly over to hug her daughter. "Yes," added Penthorpe Troy, only a couple steps behind his wife. "It is fortuitous that your schedule lined up this way this year." Delanna hugged her father. "Yes, very fortuitous. It's almost like the same fortune that happened to schedule us to be in the middle of the dark last Christmas decided it would rather have me here." "Well, you know, dear, if you took a job at the office instead of insisting on riding around the universe as pirate bait, you could be here every Christmas." Eugenia looked me over for the first time. "I am sure we can find something for the Lunar as well." "We always need janitorial drone cleaners," Penthorpe suggested, motioning to the service drone loading luggage onto its flatbed back. Delanna moved to join me at the back of the auto. "Zane and I are quite happy with what we're doing. We're saving up to buy our own freighter soon, hopefully one that does not smell like it is primarily used to transport dirty laundry." "You're not going to join the competition, are you, darling?" Eugenia asked. "It simply would not do for a Troy to work for another firm." "It barely does to have one working in your capacity now," Penthorpe added. "Do you know how much we have to dance around the subject when our friends are talking about what their children are doing? VPs, CEOs, heading colonies on new worlds. Oh, and what is your daughter doing, Penthorpe? He continued. Well, she's wasting her potential hauling freight with her lunar boyfriend. That must be very difficult for you, Father. I am sorry to put so much strain on you. Then, to her mother, we could always just work as independents. Oh my, that may be worse, Eugenia said, and turned her back to us. Come along and freshen up before dinner. Delanna and her parents went inside, followed by the luggage-bearing drone. It was only as the auto pulled away that I realized that the drone had only been loading up Delanna's bags. It had left mine at my feet. The week leading up to Christmas found me on my own, while Delanna spent the days with her parents. I passed much of the time walking around the dome's interior, marveling at how a structure that once produced food for 1,000 colonists was now housing a single pair of snoot pots. Much of the dome was taken up with forest that looked like something I had only ever seen in pre-Exodus Earth tridios and tudios. The snow-covered trees were beautiful, and the whole thing made the holiday snow rooms back on Luna seem pitiful by comparison. There was also a frozen pond, a field that I think was a football pitch, tennis courts, and, out near the edge of the dome, a small snow-covered shack. The structure looked to have been built from random pieces of plasteel, plexiglass, some pieces of real wood from the dome's trees. The whole thing looked like it was held together with foamcrete sprayed into the gaps. I wondered how old it was. Did Delanna build this when she was young? Did Penthorpe? I could hardly imagine a young Penthorpe building anything himself. Actually, I couldn't really imagine a young Penthorpe. I sort of see him as having been born a middle-aged snootpot. I tried to look inside, but the snow was too thick for me to get the door open. I did shine the light from my datapod through one of the plexiglass windows, and could see a table, some tanks, boxes, and other containers. No clear signs of who it all belonged to, like a property of Delanna Troy sign or anything. I only really saw Delanna's parents in person at mealtimes. The house was large enough to avoid each other the rest of the time, but that was plenty enough daily awkwardness for me. I'd speak to Delanna, they'd speak to Delanna. Delanna would speak to all of us, and they would either ignore my existence or look at me like someone had taken a big excrete on the table in front of me. Christmas Day began with another of these uncomfortable breakfasts, but then, rather than splitting up for the day, or even going and opening presents, Penthorpe ended the meal by announcing, "All right, let us go and dress for dinner." Delanna jumped up from her chair and practically dragged me out of the dining room and up to her bedroom suite. "Dress for dinner?" I asked as she pulled me up the stairs. "Of course! It's Christmas!" "But we just had breakfast." "Well, if we want dinner to be ready in time, we need to go and catch it early." Catch? Catch what? Dinner! The beefalope! Beefalope? I repeated unintelligently. "You mean like in the Dreamscape game?" "Yes! Come on!" I remembered from the previous Christmas that Delanna had made me play this virtual hunting game that was supposed to recreate Christmas at the original Mars colony. A quantity of fertilized embryos had been brought to Mars, including these bovine deer hybrids called Beefalope. These beefalope had been incubated and raised before the colony was really ready to support livestock, so that the colonists could have real meat to eat during the winter holidays, instead of their normal veg and rations. Unfortunately, the containment pen the animals were kept in failed, and the beefalope escaped. In order to secure their Christmas dinner, and also keep the beefalope from breaking stuff in the still struggling colony, the colonists had to hunt them down. Being from Luna, I was mostly unaware of this history. Delanna, though, she was raised on this, so she made sure we played that Christmas hunting sim on our Dreamscape before we could eat our fabulous Christmas meal of instant noodles, beer, and cocoa-flavored brew calf. Of course, when I say that she was raised on this, I mean that I thought that she played Sims on the Dreamscape, or perhaps went to a better-than-real to play it in one of their VR decks. I'd never imagined the truth. When we got back to Delanna's room, there were outfits laid out for us on the bed. Mine looked like something a cartoon character would wear. It was a mud-brown coat with a bright red collar, mud-brown pants, a pair of matching boots, a ridiculously tall hat that was the same brown as everything else on the front and the bill, but the bright red of the collar on the sides and back. Isn't this the same color as a beefalope? I asked, holding up the coat. Yeah, that's why you have the red, to make you stand out. Delanna's outfit was less cartoonish. It was a pair of tan leggings, a black waistcoat over a tan long-sleeved shirt, a black cap, and a pair of shiny black boots that came up to just below her knees. Hurry up and get dressed, Delanna urged me. I don't think this is how the colonists dressed, I said, examining the hat. Shut it. Father picked that out especially for you. Well, that explains it. We dressed for the hunt, and despite my protests that I looked like a walking turd, Delanna rushed me back down the stairs and out to the back deck where her parents were waiting. Her parents were also dressed both inauthentically and better than me. Penthorpe and Eugenia were dressed similarly to their daughter, only Penthorpe was wearing a pair of tan jodhpurs that bulged out a bit comically at the thighs, and Eugenia was wearing a big frilly canvasy dress. Their hats were similar to mine at least, although solid black and maybe a third as tall.
Ah, there you are, Penthorpe announced. We thought perhaps the Lunar was not accustomed to such articles of clothing.
I have worn a coat before, sir, thank you, I responded, earning me a subtle stomp to the foot. It's time to bring out the beast, Eugenia called out. I could only see the top of the cage between the balusters of the deck's railing at first, but then a pair of service drones emerged from around the side of the deck, towing the large barred box, containing the biggest animal I'd ever seen outside of a zoo. The beefalope had a wide nose with gaping nostrils and a pair of long, ribbed horns sweeping back over its skull from above its eyes. It was wide, but still sleek with close brown fur covering its hide from the top of its back down to its long, sturdy-looking legs, to where it turned white just above the hooves. "Unleash the beast!" cried Eugenia, in what was, I am pretty sure, the only time I ever heard her raise her voice. The back of the cage fell open, but the beefalope just stood there, staring at us, with mean-looking eyes, until one of the service drones played the sound of a large gun firing. At the noise, the beefalope shot out of the cage and bolted majestically across the snow and towards the tree line in the distance.
All right, announced Penthorpe. Let us choose our weapons.
Penthorpe motioned towards me. I turned around and almost tripped over the service drone that had silently moved up behind me. On its back was a rack of guns. And when I say guns, I mean actual Old Terra firearms that were very much the kind of thing the first Martians absolutely did not have. I looked to Delanna, and to my surprise, I found her eyes shining with excitement. I think that if the sun had gone out, I would have still seen her eyes glowing in the darkness. Now, let me be clear, I was not put off by Delanna's glee in this activity at all. Life is cheap in this universe. I've had to put down more than enough people who were asking for it. And Delanna, well, she killed someone in front of me within 5 minutes of meeting her, so don't think I had a moral issue with hunting a beefalope. It just seemed very decadent to me, and it just wasn't the sort of thing Delanna normally was into. I didn't realize that she had another agenda here.
Now, normally we would hunt as a group, Penthorpe explained. But Delanna suggested that it might be fun for us to split up and see who the best hunters are. Eugenia and I have discussed this departure from tradition and decided that it is a novel idea.
There's no monetary prize or anything, Eugenia said at me like I was a child, although I suppose this was an improvement from being spoken about like I wasn't there.
No, of course not,
added Penthorpe, stepping around me to pick a large and angry-looking black rifle from the rack.
This is merely a battle for honor.
Eugenia walked over and picked up a different, but equally nasty-looking weapon. Let's all be careful out there. We wouldn't want any accidents, she cautioned, looking me dead in the eyes. Delanna and I watched her parents walk towards the tree line, rifles in their arms, and a service drone following behind them with ammunition containers on its back. "They're going to shoot me, you know," I said as they disappeared into the trees. "They are not, and your outfit should be bulletproof anyway," Delanna explained, looking over the rifles left on the weapons rack. "So they'll just shoot me in the face?" "Their aim stinks. Why do you think they use those ridiculous automatic rifles? When you fire 100 rounds a minute, aim ceases to be an issue." "Is that supposed to make me feel better?" Delanna picked up a less imposing-looking rifle than either of the ones her parents chose and handed it to me. It was still all black, but this had a bolt action under its large scope and a short magazine protruding from in front of its trigger guard, instead of the higher-capacity magazines on her parents' guns. This was either an actual old Terran antique or a very good reproduction. Regardless, it certainly cost more than we made that year. "You use this. This is the best rifle here," she said. "Then shouldn't you use it? I've never even held a weapon like this before." "It's basically the same as a bolter. Point it at the thing you want dead and pull the trigger. The only real difference is that this kicks like a footballer. It's almost just like the ones in Dreamscape shooters." She finished choosing her weapon, a shorter rifle made of wood, real, actual wood, and silver metal with no sight, and a lever under the receiver. For some reason, it had the number 76 engraved next to the loading port. Delanna looked out in the direction her parents had headed out, and, satisfied that they had disappeared into the trees, she stepped around the service drone and pulled 2 infospec cases out from behind the weapons rack. "One more thing to ensure our victory," she said, tossing one of the cases to me. I caught it awkwardly in my left hand. "What are you up to?" "Put them on and see," she said, with that running towards the bolter fire smile on her face. I leaned my rifle against the service drone and opened up an infospec case. As I had guessed from the nice case they were in, these were not my normal infospecs, but much nicer ones. Future Tech IG-501Rs. "Merry Christmas," Delanna said. "Can we afford these? Did you buy these out of ship money?" No, and don't worry about it. I did nothing immoral." Well, I know about your morals." "Then you know not to worry about it," she said flatly. "Put them on." I put the augmented reality glasses on and watched them boot up with the Future Tech logo superimposed over my view of the snowy lawn and woods. The words, "Good morning, Zane, Merry Christmas," appeared in front of my eyes. The words dissolved, and along with the normal icons I expect from any pair of infospecs, there were some bright orange shapes in my view, with numbers floating above them. 3 of the shapes were close together, and were shaped like 2 humans and a service drone. The third was by itself, and looked a lot like the outline of a beefalope. I looked over at Delanna, whose eyes were now obscured by the silver lenses of her own infospecs. A bright orange halo surrounded her, and the number 1 floated above her head. She was approximately 1 meter away from me. "We're winning." "This is cheating," I said. "Seeking an advantage over a competitor is never cheating," Delanna said. "Father would do it himself if he thought of it." "So this is, what, linked into the security system?" "Got it in one." The sound of rapid gunfire echoed out of the trees and off the inside of the dome. It sounded like it was coming from multiple directions. I looked in the direction that the shapes of Penthorpe and Eugenia were, and saw that they were nowhere near the beefalope. Delanna blew a scoffing breath out from between her lips. "Pathetic, trying to psych us out." She raised her rifle and fired 3 rapid shots towards the trees, working the lever so fast between rounds that it almost seemed to blur. Stepping down from the porch, a service drone identical to the one following her parents moved around from the side of the house to join her. She opened up one of the ammunition cases on the drone's back and quickly reloaded her rifle. She closed the ammo box and looked up at me. "Come on, we have dinner to catch, and then that thing's head is going up on the wall in our quarters." A taxidermy beefalope head was just what I wanted watching over me while I slept, but I thought we could discuss that later. We headed off in the direction of the beefalope at a casual walk. We could see that our competition were still heading in the wrong direction, and if we rushed the hunt too much, our advantage would have been obvious. Occasionally, Delanna would fire a shot or two in the general direction of the beefalope, just to frass with her parents. Periodically, we would hear one of them let out a burst of fire, for the same reason. When this happened, the beefalope would run, sometimes towards us, sometimes away. I assume because it was reacting to where it thought the noise was coming from. We would adjust our course accordingly. Aside from the occasional gunfire, the only sound in the woods was the snow crunching under our boots. I had never imagined getting to walk through a snow-covered wood on Christmas Day, even if it was one in a Martian agrodome. We slowed our movements in an attempt to be quieter as we got closer to the beefalope. Now that we were closing in, we didn't want to spook it. We found ourselves 100 yards from the beefalope. Only trees stood between us and a clear shot. This was it. Delanna motioned for me to move up, and I slowly crept forward, trying to keep the sound of crunching snow to a minimum. She stayed a few meters behind me, ready to back me up if I missed. And then either Penthorpe or Eugenia decided to fire their gun again. The sound bounced off the surface of the dome, seemingly coming from 3 different directions. The beefalope's head jerked up, and it took off straight at me. I could see the orange shape of the animal coming towards me in my infospecs. I fired the rifle. Delanna had been right. It did kick like a footballer. I missed. It didn't. The bovine deer crashed through the low-hanging branches between 2 of the trees, spraying snow in the air. I started working the bolt on the rifle, but it was too late. Head down, the beefalope crashed into my left shoulder, hitting me like an entire football squad and spinning me off to the right. It bounced me off of a tree trunk and knocked the air from my lungs before falling to the snow. Thank goodness the horns on those things sweep backwards instead of forwards, or we would have found out how stab-proof that ridiculous outfit I had on was. The beefalope is a nimble and aggressive creature, and why they didn't engineer it to be more like its slow, sedate cow ancestors is something I don't understand. The animal saw Delanna now and changed course to go at her. Delanna didn't shoot. I was in the line of fire. She tried to dodge instead, but the beefalope matched her and butted her square in the middle of the chest. It lifted its head as it moved, throwing her up into the air. Limbs flailed as she was launched over the animal's back. The rifle flew in one direction, her hat in another, and her infospecs in a third. All came down in a loose grouping as the beefalope ran away, leaping over the service drone and then putting trees between itself and us. "Delanna," I croaked. Up to that point, I had never been so scared for her. I found it in myself to scramble across the ground to her. I was shocked to see her grinning. Are you okay?" "Better than that piece of excrete's going to be." She sat up, seemingly completely unfazed by her flight. "You?" I rolled my shoulder experimentally. "I think so, but we need to get checked out." "Fornk that," she said, climbing to her feet. "We need to shoot that thing." Delanna collected her rifle and infospecs, leaving the hat. "Let's get him," she said, sliding the glasses back onto her face. Delanna took off at a full run. After a moment, I followed with the service drone following closely behind me. If it weren't for the infospecs, I would have lost both Delanna and our quarry, but the glasses kept me up to date on how far in front of me they were. I kept after my partner until she slowed and stopped. She was holding her hand up, and as I got a clear look at her without forest between us, I could see that she was signaling for me to stop. I slowed and crept up behind her, and she pointed towards where the beefalope had stopped on the other side of some trees. I don't know if it was catching its breath, or if it just thought it was away from any immediate threat, but it was only about 50 yards away from us. "Why don't you just shoot it?" I whispered. "Because it's more fun if you win." "Yeah, it's more embarrassing for Daddy if the Lunar beats him. You make it sound like I'm just using you to annoy my parents, Delanna whispered. You know that's only part of it. I shook my head and took aim at the animal. It was standing in front of a large mound of snow, only it wasn't just a mound of snow, because I could see the plexiglass of a window peeking out through it. Hey, I've been here, I whispered. What? When? A couple of days ago. There's some little cabin over there, I said as quietly as possible, trying to sight my rifle on where the animal's heart should have been. I was wondering if you built it, or maybe your dad, or someone else. A cabin? Delanna sounded confused. I inhaled and held it for a second. Oh, excrete, don't! I exhaled and pulled the trigger. I'll never know if my shot was good or not. A fraction of a second later, it felt like I was hit by an entire football league. My world had become light and noise. You see, the little cabin playhouse thing I had found was Delanna's, and one thing she had not told me about herself before then was that she went through a pyro phase in her youth, and she used this little shack to make little explosive devices that she would then use to blow up little things for fun. I don't know if the bullet passed through the beefalope and into the shack, or if I just missed the animal altogether, but I know it hit something inside Delanna's playhouse of doom and ignited it. The explosion pretty much liquefied the beefalope, which painted everything in our general direction in a nice coat of pureed meat. It felled a couple of trees, one of which barely missed me and Delanna, but did manage to crush the service drone carrying our extra ammunition, and knocked both of us off our feet. The dome reflected the sound hard enough to shake the snow off of the trees, not already cleared by the fireball. Luckily, those things were built to be able to withstand meteorite strikes, so while the inside of the dome was blackened, it was undamaged. I lay on the ground as my senses started to return to me. I was wet, and not just from the beefalope chunks. The fire had triggered the dome's suppression system, and it had started raining on us. Thankfully, the infospecs had protected my eyes from the worst of the explosion's flash, and the splatter, but the right lens was cracked and had gone black. I pulled them free of my face. Delanna's beefalope blood-splattered face appeared just above me, also free of glasses. She was on her hands and knees and saying something. I could see that she was laughing and pointing, but I couldn't hear her over the ringing in my ears. I was pushed into a sitting position and looked. My ridiculous, cartoonish hat was stuck to the trunk of a tree. It had been pinned there by one of the beefalope's horns, with a grisly shard of skull still on the end of it. I started laughing too. We kept that horn, had it right up until the end. And that's how I ruined Christmas. Or at least Delanna's parents declared it ruined. This was apparently the first time in Penthorpe's life that they did not eat beefalope killed by a member of the family for Christmas dinner. Delanna viewed it differently. She declared us the victors of the hunt, having hidden the infospecs into my coat pockets before her parents made their way over to us, and suggested that, if you still truly have your heart set on the beefalope, we could try and gather up the pieces and make a stew out of it. And she almost got the whole sentence out without laughing. We ended up going out to dinner at Red, an extremely exclusive and snoot-potty restaurant. The Troy name is enough to get you a table at pretty much any restaurant on Mars, even on Christmas night. While the rest of us ate beefalope steaks, Delanna had ordered Martian-raised salmon. I don't even like beefalope, had been her explanation to me. The salmon did look better. During dessert, she leaned over and spoke into my ear. Just wait until Easter, and started giggling like a child on Christmas.
Author's note.
Hello, Potato. I am Void Munashii, or just Void. The Beefalope Hunt, or How I Ruined Christmas, is part of a series of stories following the characters of Zane and Delanna, a pair of minor characters from a novel that I've unsuccessfully tried to write multiple times over the years. As it stands right now, I do not believe that any of the other stories are available online, something I plan to address in the new year. Zane's life with Delanna is always a bit over the top, and I thought it would be fun to explore a little of where she gets that, what Christmas would have been like for her growing up, and how Zane, a person of much more modest origins, would adjust to it.
All right, everybody, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the story.
I know I did.
You know my line.
You were totally right in your introduction. I do have very, very small genitals. But the other thing that you were right about was that this is unlike any of the other stories. This is a futuristic sci-fi comedic adventure story set on another planet. And it feels like another adventure of these characters, like it's part of a series.
Uh-huh.
And so I just assumed that there were several Zane and Delanna stories out there, and he decided to write a Christmas one, based on our prompt. But I'm not sure if I'm right on that. He said that they were minor characters in a novel?
Right. I expected that we would be able to link to a bunch of places where the rest of the stories were and be like, if you want to hear more about Zane and Delanna. But yeah, he was saying, I guess, that they're not available, but at the very least, he is planning on remedying that in the new year. So sometime soon, you'll be able to go and see those stories somewhere. But yeah, the minor characters in a novel that he has tried several times to write but hasn't succeeded. So I guess it'll be a while before we get to see that appearance. I don't know. Like another character that we've done a bunch of stories of here on our show is Catastrophe Baker. And if I'm remembering this right, Catastrophe Baker was a minor character in a novel that Mike Resnick wrote. And then he just kind of branched off and wrote a whole series of tall tales based on, the adventures of this guy who is just a minor character in something else. But that's an interesting thing to do. I can understand that, though. It almost feels like Ahsoka Tano or something like that. She was in a very recent episode of The Mandalorian, and I'm pretty sure that was sort of a, what do they call it? A backdoor pilot? Yeah, I think they're planning on making a whole series about Ahsoka Tano, which I guess could be interesting, and we find out why the heck she's not dead, along with all the other Jedis. Or maybe we already know that. I don't know. I never watched the Clone Wars TV show.
Well, yeah, if you watch the last episodes of the Clone Wars, they stop being about Anakin and Obi-Wan, and they just start being about her and what happens to her during what's known as Order 66. I think you would probably just watch those 3 episodes or whatever and be satisfied.
Oh, okay. So they have told that story already.
Yeah, it was just this year.
So this would just have to be what she's done since.
Right. But she also showed up on Rebels, which takes place before Star Wars, before A New Hope. So she was alive then, too.
Okay. She didn't show up on Resistance, though, did she?
No, she didn't.
But yeah, that is interesting to think about that, is that, it makes sense. Jedis were supposed to be pretty numerous underfoot, I suppose. But yeah, that some of them are out there doing their thing while the whole Star Wars saga is going on, and they just don't ever participate in it. It's interesting. It's interesting to hear about minor characters from another novel. But yeah, this one was very fun. I liked the sci-fi, it seemed like he came up with a lot of stuff for it. And maybe if he's written a bunch of these stories, it's not stuff that he even came up with recently. But, they start off waiting for an auto, which isn't an annoyingly repetitive name for a self-driving car, but it's shorter than self-driving car. so I can see it catching on. And, all the other things, the service drones, which drone in this case sounds like it just means droid to me, not like a thing that hovers above the ground on 4 propellers. I love this kind of stuff, this kind of space opera-y stuff. There's a series by C.J. Cherry that's about space traders, not traitors, but traders. I always really enjoyed that too. It's just, the idea of people flying around. And then there was another series which was by Nathan Lowell, who is a podcaster and / author in similar vein to us, but this guy actually gets things done. But he had a series where it was called Quarter Share, and then the next one was Half Share, and etc. I think the Golden Age of the Solar Clipper is what the full title of the series was. But I just love that kind of stuff. Those kind of stories of, somebody traveling space and growing in prowess and wealth and etc. It's just, I guess, right down my alley. I've always been kind of into that kind of thing. Are you a space opera fan along that lines, or are you more the space wizard fan?
Yeah, I'm probably more of a space wizard guy. I haven't read that much space opera. I think we talked about that years ago when we were asking people to send us space opera. I really didn't know what it was. But I do love, whatever Star Trek is of, the adventures. They go to a new planet and this is what they discover, or they encounter another ship and this is the adventure they have, or, they go to this place, they have this problem and then they solve it. But they barely are able to solve it. They're hanging on by the ship is always on the verge of falling apart. I love that kind of stuff. Firefly, we always talked about.
Yeah.
One of the things that made Firefly so good was that they always were on the verge of losing everything. Life was really, really hard for these guys. And I know that's not exactly what you're asking, although is Firefly space opera?
Yeah, Firefly, I think, and Star Trek probably count as space opera. I think the opera thing is just, big story, something exciting and bombastic. And the thing that these kind of stories also kind of remind me of is the old stories of, the sailors that would go around, I don't know, like Moby Dick, or what's his name?
Horatio Hornblower?
There we go. Yeah, I wanted to say he has a weird, silly name. But yeah, the various Horatio Hornblower stories, or the Master and Commander, all these kind of things are basically, you could totally just adapt them into a space story, generally. That stuff appeals to me.
Well, if you, as the listener, enjoyed this story, you might want to bug Void to make the other stories available. I'm really curious about these two and the other adventures they've had. I keep using that word. I need to find a thesaurus and find a word that means adventure. But it really does feel like it's part of a bigger... This is a chapter in the many adventures of Zane and Delanna. Because it feels like they have a history that we're not aware of, that's sort of vaguely referred to, and then they go on to do other things after this story, and that's cool.
Yeah, they go on to do other things after, and they've done stuff before, and if you look around, you'll be able to find that history and know more about it. That's, I think, a really good sales tactic, too. Get people to, want to discover more about your characters. What did you think of the Beefalope?
A what?
Oh, I thought it was neat. And you made a Beefalope for the cover art.
Yeah, see, that's what you think.
Oh, really?
But that is, in fact, an actual Earth creature.
You a lion.
I'm serious. It has a name. It totally looks like like an anteater or something like that has been combined with an antelope or something else. It's called a saiga antelope or a saiga. I don't know. Saiga. I don't know how you pronounce that. It's a saiga antelope. It looks like it's some kind of bioengineered creature. It looks like, what were they called? The wuzzles. Do you remember the wuzzles?
It sounds familiar. What were wuzzles?
They were little stuffed animals that you could get back in the 80s. And
they
were basically
crossed between two different animals?
Yeah, they were stuffed animals that were crossed between
like
two.
Bumble Lion?
Yes, there you go. You remember him. Bumble Lion and Hoppo, which was a hippo, and half of a rabbit. And then there was Ellaroo, which is half a elephant and a kangaroo. And Moosel, I don't remember that one. Half moose and half seal? Okay. So anyways, that's what this thing looks like. It looks like it's half antelope and half anteater. So it's an anteater-elope. I was planning on creating a beefalope.
A what?
For the art. And so I searched for an antelope, and then I was going to try and figure out some way to Photoshop an antelope and a cow together. But then when I saw that thing, I'm like, that thing looks so much like an alien that I am not going to bother doing anything to it because it looks great. Everybody's going to look at that and go, wow, look at that alien. That looks so real. Because it is. So yeah, it worked out great, that a whole idea behind it. The history, that's another one of those things that I enjoyed about this story is, he has this history of Mars where the colonists came and they had the beefalopes, which were some bioengineered creature that was supposed to give them the most protein or whatever. Then they managed to get out of their pen, and so they had to hunt them down at Christmas. And now every year they relive that with a beefalope hunt.
A what?
Just those kind of details I just love when you get into a story like this.
Yeah, it's fun. I always wanted to write a series about a ship that was, a Starship Enterprise crossed with, Serenity kind of thing. But
Starship Enterprise crossed with a beefalope?
Yes, there you go. Crossed with a kangaroo. I never did. But I wish I read more, because it would be fun to pick up some books like this and just let them take me away. I love the super long series where they can basically go as long as the writer keeps getting paid to make them.
Yeah, as long as he comes up with new ideas, then he can just keep going. There was a time when we were talking about collaborating on a story like that, and I do remember you saying just a week or two ago that one of your goals for next year is to collaborate with me on something, so maybe we should try looking into that again. Did you ever write that story that you were originally planning on collaborating with me, where there was the Captain Kirk type guy that had a ship, and the young buck or whatever hires him to run the ship again after he's retired or something? I can't remember how it went. Something like that, though. Does that sound familiar to you?
Yeah, I started it. I never got beyond the first chapter. Yeah, he had been like a Captain Kirk when he was young, and then he's disgraced, and his reputation precedes him anywhere he goes, and no one will give him a chance. And this young man, whose father served with the captain in his heyday, gives him this second chance. Yeah, it was something that you and I talked about years and years ago. I always wanted to write something like that and come up with like a colorful crew, and each one would have, a secret and stuff that would come out as the series progressed. But like we were saying about Marshall's story last time, I knew it was too big. I wasn't ready to do it. I wasn't a good enough writer. I may still not be, but anyhow, you write your strengths, and I admire the people that can write big, long series and come back to the same characters and make them deeper and make the relationships deeper as they go along for years and years.
That's starting to become one of your strengths, though. You might be ready for it, because how many Dead and Breakfast stories have you written this year?
I don't know, this year. 6 this year? 7? There are 11 now total.
Yeah, you're to the point where you have more than you can fit in a single collection. It's going to have to become a series of collections of these stories. So you delving in further with each time with these characters. I think you might be ready. We'll have to consider it. Maybe what we need to do is just get on the phone and do a plan session, like we did with Last Contact, our Parsec award-winning story. Because that worked out well. Maybe we should try that again. We could get going on a series where we write a new story once a year.
Oh, that would be really neat. Yeah. Well, yeah, that was one of my goals for 2021. So it sounds like you might be interested.
Yeah. Of course, I'm not going to live till 2021, but, if the world didn't come to an end before then, that would be cool.
Yeah, the whatever species comes next will dedicate the book to your memory.
There we go.
The beefalopes will enjoy it.
Yes.
Even if the human beings don't. So I was about to make a brilliant observation on here. I was going to say that all of these stories have the main character meeting the in-laws. I was going to observe that they had this in common. This was a tremendous coincidence.
That is a big weird. Wow. Yeah, I didn't even catch on to that. Wow.
Yeah, I see. And I was going to segue that into talking about, is that a sort of a rite of passage, something that every single person in a relationship has to go through? Is it something that you see it a lot in media? It seems a universally dreaded activity to meet the parents. They ought to make a movie called that, because it's just this.
Yeah, they should. Or, I don't know, Meet the Fockers. That might be a cool title too.
Well, but that gives away a little bit what you think of your in-laws if you made a movie called that. And what is it about that is so stressful for a person in a relationship?
Well, I suppose, somebody's parents tend to have a large amount of influence over them. So if you don't make a good impression, they think you're an idiot. They're not going to want their daughter or son to hitch their wagon to you. That can kill a relationship there. Maybe things are going well and you're just like, oh crap, now I'm going to meet the parents. And I'm such an idiot, there's no way I'll make a good impression. And it's coming to an end soon. Something like that? I don't know.
Yeah, no, I hear that. It's you're taking yourself out of your comfort zone and usually going to somebody else's home and putting yourself in a vulnerable position for them to judge you.
Uh-huh.
And determine whether their little girl has made a mistake or not, whether their little girl, their princess
/boy
can do better. That's, to me, this is an outsider's perspective, but that idea of the girl's mother taking her aside and saying, your father and I wanted better for you. You can do better. That is just terrifying. I'm not a person that likes to open himself up for criticism, for rejection, and this seems like a major one that it's really hard to avoid. It's like, Mom, Dad, this is Jeremy. He normally looks better than this. That kind of thing. You're just,
yeah.
Mom, Dad, before you say anything, I was very, very drunk. Just these things.
And now it's too late. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it is tough. And sometimes I think, like this story where you have a child who has different aspirations than the parents have. You know what I mean? Like the guy that she's with is like the perfect guy for her, but her parents want something else, and they're going to be judgy, and they're going to ridicule him and try and make fun of him and put him down and make him feel like he shouldn't be there, sort of in an attempt to get their daughter back. You know, they're tired of her, slumming it in her own ship. She should be, working as part of their company. That, I think, may sometimes be a lot of what you get too. Like, there's always a generation gap. The child comes home to the parents, and once they've moved out and got out on their own, they realize they want to be this or that or whatever. I don't know. Maybe they're still just doing the kind of things that like a teenager would do, even though they're a little older. So they're still rebelling and getting tongue piercings and that kind of stuff. And the parents are just like, no, come on, come back over here to our side of the street, trying to get them to settle down, to grow up, to act like an adult or whatever. In this case, this poor guy's just caught in the middle of that. He really had no chance at impressing the parents. Not a Lunar, a dirty, dirty Lunar.
Right. They're blue bloods, and he's just a guy from the streets, essentially. That idea of this is what my girl grew up around. This is what she is used to. And I could not possibly provide that kind of life for her. You get like a double sense of impending rejection from something like that.
Yeah.
The dating somebody who comes from money and you don't. Jeez, how do people even get together? I just don't know.
Yeah, and that's one of those things that I felt. My very first girlfriend, my first longtime girlfriend, we'll say, in high school, her parents had a decent chunk of change. They had a pretty nice house, and they had things going on. They had a Lexus in the garage and so forth. And we had a Cadillac, but it was a really, really old one.
Yeah, 1972.
And it was ugly as could be. It was maroon too. Ooh, that's just the color everybody wants. But yeah, I sometimes felt that a fair amount. But it wasn't their fault, I'll have to say, in that case. They were welcoming and really great and nice and everything. So it was never one of those disdainful, you met the girlfriend's parents and they think you're a piece of crap. I think her parents liked me pretty well. I do remember I had a friend that I grew up with, like in 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, 7th grade. We were best friends for most of that time. And it's not like even his family was really all that much better off than we were, although, most people were. But he just felt like he was better than us, So his dad would always kind of sneer at me and I remember, he would do something and we'll say he gave me a cookie. He gave us both cookies. He gave his son a cookie, gave me a cookie. His son didn't say thank you, and neither did I. But he would give it to me, and then he would say, "You're welcome." And I would go, "Oh." Huh. And he says, the proper response after you say you're welcome is that you should say thank you.
Well, is it?
And I was just like, oh, I thought it was supposed to go the other way around. Okay. But, I was a little kid. I didn't have manners. I didn't grow up in the South where they spank your butt if you don't say yes, ma'am, and yes, sir, every time anybody talks to you. I ran into a lot of those folks around here now. I don't know, just always had that kind of a disdainful attitude of me, and that was always kind of frustrating. I didn't like that much, I'll have to admit, and it was something that I ran into a fair amount growing up because, I was in a very large family that was struggling to make ends meet. We were in a good neighborhood where most everybody else had a very small family and were not struggling to make ends meet. Yeah, I always felt like the poorest kid in class, the poorest guy. I was always wearing the hand-me-down clothes and stuff like that. Never felt like I could measure up. And that's totally changed now. I'm full of confidence, as I'm sure you've noticed.
Well, only compared to me.
It is definitely a hard thing. How did you enjoy doing the voices of the in-laws, Rish?
Oh, that was the most fun thing about it, was coming up with distinctive voices for those characters.
Now, I noticed when I was editing the story down a couple of times, you were doing, at one point you do this thing, you're doing the wife's voice, the mother's voice, and you mess up the line, and then you go, oh, this is going to be delightful. And then you went on. And
I would say this is going to be delightful.
Yeah, something like that. This would be delightful. And it sounded to me like you were doing one of those things like way back when you're doing Jonathan Rhys-Davies impression.
There are no dwarf women.
Yes, and you kept saying, there are no dwarf women. And you would do that over and over again so that you could get yourself into the right voice before you would do your lines.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what it just sounded like to me. And then, of course, at one other time you went,
it's totally that same kind of thing. You know, it's just like something. It's a shorthand to go back to this character. Probably there are patterns in my brain, and it's just a way to get me going back into one of those patterns. There are no dwarf women.
Seems like a really handy trick. There was one other time where you were doing your voice, then you just stopped and went, Thurston.
What is it, lovey?
And that's when it really jumped out at me exactly who it was that you were going for. I suppose there's not a lot of people that know who Thurston and Lovey are.
Oh, I would think anybody listening to our show is of an appropriate age to recognize that.
That's probably true.
Because I wouldn't think that we draw a large young audience every year. They're millennials and Gen Zs discovering the Dunesteef every year. I feel like it's probably the opposite.
You don't think so? It's not just a huge amount? Yeah, it is the opposite. It is boomers and Gen Xers dropping the Dunesteef every year. Every year, a few more of them. But yeah, Gilligan's Island is one of those things that's just pretty much gone away. I don't hear much. I guess there's still the 3-hour tour thing. You do still hear that sometimes. But it used to be such a cultural touchstone that just kind of vanished as time went by. I'm sure that my children have never heard of Gilligan's Island. I could bring it up to them and they would have no idea what I was referring to.
Yeah, oh well.
No, we have to change this. This is an important cultural icon. We must save it.
I can't even imagine sitting down with my children and saying, hey, this show was totally seminal in my childhood development. This show made me who I am today. And they're like, oh my gosh, all right. Well, actually pay attention for once. And then I push play and it's like, just sit right back and you'll hear a tale of a fateful trip. And before the song, the greatest theme song of all time is even done playing, the kids have already, started texting and they're on YouTube.
Yeah, they're already looking at their phones and texting and playing games and making that jerking off hand motion as they roll their eyes.
Yeah, there's an emoji for that probably.
Or it could be worse. They pay attention and then they're like, oh my God, this is what shaped him? No wonder I've always hated Dad. That wouldn't happen.
Is that a huge fear? When your kids got old enough to form their own opinions of what was cool and what was uncool, did you fear that they would think you were uncool?
Not a lot. I didn't fear much that they would think I was uncool. I don't know. Sometimes I think that my kids don't enjoy hanging out with me as much as that as once was the case. I don't know. I guess it's the way of it. I was the same way with my parents. Once I grew up and kind of moved on, I didn't hang out with them or do much stuff with them. Which, I don't know. Sadly, I really kind of regret that kind of stuff now. I wish I had been different now that both of my parents are gone. Yeah, I feel like I've wasted an opportunity. I guess I still have my stepmom that I can try and spend more time with, although on the phone. I can spend more time with her on the phone. But it always keeps me worrying because she's of an age that puts her right in the worst demographic for this whole COVID thing. I wouldn't say she's particularly healthy either, so if it comes for her, it could be some real trouble. I worry about that. Worry about if there's more time to spend with them, or if I have more regrets waiting for me because, again, I didn't spend enough time with them like I should have. But yeah, I don't know. That's one of those things I think that, as you're growing and you start to care about what's cool and what isn't cool and stuff, and you'll drift away from family and stuff like that. And then at some point, you're going to get old enough that you realize that stuff didn't matter. That cool stuff wasn't really cool at all. It was just noise. And yeah, I don't know. You look back and think, oh, geez, I should have done different things. I wasted my life. Maybe that's just me. I do think that I waste my life an awful lot. So there is that.
Oh, wow. I'm starting to regret this pickup recording idea of mine. This brilliant idea of let's make the episode longer. I know I am not cool to the vast majority of people, but I feel like I have something to contribute and that I am clever and funny to, a select few people. And I'm always hoping that my nephews think that I am cool. And the other day,
right,
they put on the Santa Claus from 1994 and they were watching it. And then the 9-year-old said, oh, hey, did you know there are 2 more of these? And I said, oh, yeah, I actually worked on the 3rd one. Let me know when you guys watch that. And so they put it on, and there's this scene where Martin Short, as Jack Frost, has gained like all of Santa's powers, and he does this eye-rollingly bad, like New York, New York. Not even a parody, because parodies are clever. But he sings North Pole to the tune of New York, New York. And I was on the set that day, and I heard that over and over and over again, and I was telling the kids about that. And it's like, yeah, you don't know how many times I watched him do this. And they're like, you were there? And I said, yeah, that's me right there on the upper right of the oh, okay, he's gone. Oh, there I am again. And the kids were just like, what? Rewind it. And they rewound it. And they were like, where are, and I was like, that guy right there that's clapping, that is me. And they just didn't recognize me. I was just like, what? One of us has gone insane because that is me on the screen right now. And neither of them saw it. My sister was just like, oh yeah, that's totally him. But I guess she's used to what I used to look like.
Right.
And anyway, I looked to the kids and I thought maybe now they would be like, holy cow, he was in this movie that we're watching right now. He is cool. But they're like, okay, it's been paused long enough. Let's keep it going. And yeah, just nothing. No, they were not impressed to see me in the movie they were watching. So it's a tough crowd, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, in their defense, it was Santa Claus III.
Yeah, I saw that it has like an 18 on Rotten Tomatoes, and I just thought, oh, wow.
Yeah.
There was a reason I never saw this.
That's not really the best way to guarantee your coolness. Even if you were in the North Pole. All right. Well, I think we've come to an end of this episode. We'll go ahead and let you guys go on your merry way. And make everything merry and bright. Thanks for listening to the show.
Yeah, but before we hang up, let's ask them for donations, huh?
Oh, okay. Give us donations. Oh, wait, that's probably not the best way to do it. Yeah, if you'd like to, encourage us to finish up this insane holiday marathon, to keep going, we'd be happy to accept a small donation that we could use to, go out and buy presents for our various acquaintances or whatever. You can head over to our website, thedunesteef.com, and on the right side, there's little buttons that you can depress to give us a donation. That would be awesome.
All right. Thank you for listening once again, folks, and thank you for your donations if they are forthcoming. Thank you, Void, for sharing this story with us. And Big, you edited this story. Thank you for that. I don't remember who narrated it, but I'm sure he was very good. And we will be back sooner rather than later with another Dunesteef audio fiction magazine episode before Christmas.
That's right, folks. We'll see you then. Thanks for listening. I've been Big Anklovich.
And I'm Rish Outfield. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Happy Life Day.
Shh. Easy, Mala. Good night.
See ya.
The Dunesteef audio fiction magazine is published under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license. This means that you may share these files with anyone, but you may not charge for them or alter them. See you guys later. I'm going for a smoke break. Take two.
Could write a story based on the following premise. No, that was the year before.
When he's not writing, he can frequently be found greeting viewers with a hearty hello potato over on...
You got a potato allergy, apparently.
I do. I need a drink of water, but I'm not going to go get one, so there.
That'll show him.
A Zane and Delanna story. And the auto sped along it to a circular driveway, and the circular, dude. Delanna, this is going to be lovely. Delanna, let's all be careful out there. We wouldn't want any caution. Let's all be Thurston. And why they didn't engineer it to be more like its slow, sedate cow ancestors is something I don't understand. Yikes. I don't know if it was catching its breath, or if it just thought it was away from... Delanna asked, with only a slight tone of annoyance, as she summoned an auto with her data pod to pick us up from... God damn it! And the auto sped along it to a circular... God damn it! Delanna's parents and one of the God damn it!
Do you know how much we have to dance around the subject with our friends? God damn it.
From random pieces of plexiglass, some bits of real wood from the dome's trees. God damn it. Or perhaps went to a better than real to play it in one of their VR decks. God damn it. But did manage to crush the service drone carrying our extra ammunition. God damn it.
It almost feels like, for example, Kiadi Mundi. Shoot, what is her name? The stupid new chick on Mandalorian, the Jedi chick.
Ahsoka Tano?
There we go, thank you.
North Pole, North Pole.
I probably have told you this story before, but there were all these children dressed as elves. Uh-huh. And he had this super over-rehearsed, stupid New York parody where all these children portraying elves did like the Rockettes leg kick thing. And he went down the stairs as They were doing this kick, and they followed him out of this door to the North Pole. It's like a hobbit door, one of those great big round doors. And they just would do it over and over and over again. These elves, would follow him, and one of the takes, he closed this door behind him on one of these children. And the playback is playing, and Martin Short is lip syncing to the playback. And he totally spaced that he had squashed this child in the door. And we were all gathered around as audience members applauding, as parents and stuff. There's tons of little kids around. And these kids in front of me go, like this gasp. And it was the funniest thing to see this child. I know it's mean, but to see this child smashed in the door by Martin Short was so funny. Of course, the child was fine and being paid a heck of a lot more than the rest of us were. But still, I think I did a little drawing of Martin Short squashing a child in my notebook just to entertain myself during that. And yeah, it's funny because when that moment happened in the movie, I expected to see him crush the child because he's the bad guy of the movie. And if it were me, I'm just like, yeah, leave it in. But no, they didn't use that take. They used they used a take where nothing went wrong. But it made me laugh all these years later to think about that again and think of these children gasping in horror at the crushed child. Anyway, I just wanted there to be an outtake for the people that listen all the way to the end of the episode. I hope you're happy.
All right.
When somebody says you're welcome, you're supposed to say thank you.
That's right. That's the proper response. That's the way it goes. You give somebody something and say, you're welcome. And then they should say, thank you. Anyways. Is there anything else you want to say?
That's it. I've got nothing more to say.
All right.
You?
Nope, not really. I saw the...
Yeah, somehow we have to find things to say for 2 more of these.
Yup.
Good luck.
More stories about working on the Santa Claus. Okay, I'm hitting stop.
I pressed the button.
You're listening to the Dunesteef Audio Fiction Magazine.